Protesters gathered at Prince Rupert's Mariners Park in what locals say is the first of many provincial rallies opposing the Enbridge pipeline. The message here was clear: no oil tankers in the coastal waters of northwestern BC.
I don't want to see oil tankers coming up and down the Douglas Channel. I'm from Kitimat, and I think one spill is going to end it.
Residents say the proposed pipeline from Alberta could devastate fishing and traditional life on the Pacific coast. If approved, there would be 200 oil tankers traveling through Douglas Channel every year.
The report I read was there is going to be a leak. It's just a question of when and how much. And we all know that when you talk about oil spill response, there is no technology out there that can pick up oil.
There's no doubt opening a supply line to Asia will mean higher prices for oil derived from the tar sands. Many in Ottawa and Alberta view the pipeline as a nation-building project. Although a 2-year environmental hearing has just begun, many worry the decision is predetermined with the Conservative government backing the $5.5 billion line.
I think there's a lot of irresponsibility on comments being made now in the papers about how it's in the national interest and how, foreign interests are manipulating the process. Well, what do you think crude oil industry is? I mean, how many of those companies that have backed up this project in terms of funding are Canadian interests?
The oil pipeline and tankers would pass through the traditional territory of the Haisla First Nation. They stand between energy-hungry world markets and billions of dollars of oil sands development. They oppose the line and view their position as staring down a double-barrel gun. Many Aboriginal groups have been offered an equity stake in the pipeline.
$10 million equity stake in a $3 billion project, it really doesn't amount to much. It's, the Haisla have had a lot of experience in looking at equity and equity financing and markets and shares, and that's not a lot of money. And it takes a lot of time before that return is ever seen.
We haven't surrendered any land in this country, or this province, sorry. We haven't signed no treaties. It's ours. And until that day that we give free and prior consent, nothing's going through one way or the other.
A final decision on the environmental review isn't expected until late 2013, meaning the battle over public opinion has just begun.
Good evening. It's touted as a boon to the economy, but there has been plenty of opposition to the proposed Northern Gateway pipeline. Today, hundreds took to the streets of Prince Rupert to protest the project, with a Canadian rock star adding her voice. And as Shannon Patterson reports, while most of the worries are focused on the environment, one economist thinks the pipeline will drive up the price of oil.
They marched en masse through the streets of Prince Rupert. Hundreds of northern residents opposed to the Northern Gateway pipeline, and one Canadian punk rock star.
Oh, well, obviously, I think that it's important to protect the area and to protect the interests of the people who live here and who call it home.
The proposed pipeline would run from the Alberta oil sands to Kitimat, where crude oil would be loaded onto supertankers bound for Asia.
As an export country, we need to get our resources to the markets we send them to. That's what this is really about.
But this economist disagrees.
The intent of the Northern Gateway project is to raise the price of oil $2 to $3 a barrel on every barrel of oil that's produced in Canada every year for the next 30 years.
She says it's simple supply and demand. If Northern Gateway is built, crude that used to go to eastern Canada would be redirected to Asia. There'd be less supply here, so prices would go up.
We will only be given the benefits to the oil producers and not the costs to the Canadian economy.
But John Winter wonders if Allen's report on Northern Gateway is more about her own beliefs than economic realities.
As we know about economic reports, they can be developed to propose an outcome, I guess, and I've read economic reports on this particular project that are diametrically opposed to it.
He believes the pipeline will be a huge economic boost, but that opinion is being overshadowed by a vocal and celebrity-endorsed opposition that is dominating Energy Board hearings.
What they really need is the other perspective coming forward that says why some of those concerns are not necessarily justified.
It's time to revitalize communities and businesses.
The Northern Gateway Alliance is paying for radio and newspaper ads touting the benefits of the pipeline. But it's hard to compete with displays like this. Shannon Patterson, CTV News.
The town's largest protest ever, hundreds gathered. In Prince Rupert today, a show of force against the proposed Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline. In the town's largest protest ever, hundreds gathered to let the company know it and its oil drums are not welcome. Tim Weeks has that story.
There have been protests before, but today's was the largest so far. Hundreds gathered to march from Mariners Park to the Civic Center in Prince Rupert. Many say the proposed pipeline is a threat to their environment and their entire way of life, and that opposition to it is helping to unite the community.
We haven't signed no treaties. It's ours. And until that day that we give free and prior consent, nothing's going through one way or the other.
The proposed $5.5 billion project would involve running a twin pipeline system from near Edmonton across the border into BC, past Tumbler Ridge, running just south of Fort St. James, continuing past Burns Lake, and ending at a marine terminal in Kitimat. Enbridge says the pipeline would bring thousands of jobs, billions to the economy, and safeguards to protect the environment. But where a federal panel has met to discuss the pipeline, protesters have gathered, such as earlier this week in Fort St. James, where people said the risk of an oil spill and environmental catastrophe is too high. Today in Prince Rupert, pipeline protesters virtually took over the city, celebrating with poetry, music, and drums. Many people came from outside the town to join the demonstration. They say the plan to run a pipeline to Kitimat and then ship the oil using super tankers is risking the environmental health of the BC coastline and all those who depend on it for their food and livelihood.
Those of us on the coast have all the risk and no benefit in this project.
Enbridge says it won't comment on rallies opposing the Gateway Pipeline project. Today's protest, though, may be a sign of things to come. The federal regulatory review hearings are scheduled to take place in Prince Rupert in 2 weeks. Tim Weeks, CBC News, Vancouver.